All right. Good afternoon. I will start off with a note on Syria. As you're aware, the Secretary General has been following closely developments in the Security Council on the reported use of chemical weapons in Syria, and he continues to regret that the Council has so far been unable to reach an agreement on this issue. In the statement we issued last night, the Secretary General said he had called the ambassadors of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to reiterate his deep concern about the risks of the current impasse and stress the need to avoid the situation spiraling out of control. The Secretary General reiterated that ultimately all of our efforts must be about ending the terrible suffering of the Syrian people. While the government of Syria has reportedly taken full control over eastern Ghouta, an estimated 50,000 people remain in different towns that have changed control. In addition, an estimated 70,000 to 78,000 civilians in Douma city. Yesterday, close to 3,900 people reportedly arrived in Douma city in eastern Ghouta to Al-Bab in rural Aleppo. Nearly 3,000 of them were transported to a camp near Azaz town. As we've been making clear, any evacuation of civilians must be safe, voluntary, and in strict accordance with protection standards under international humanitarian and human rights law. It is also imperative that all those displaced are allowed to return voluntarily, in safety and in dignity, to their homes as soon as the situation allows it. The United Nations and its partners are urgently appealing for an increased funding to allow for the UN to respond, and all its partners to respond with life-saving assistance and protection services to those displaced, to IDP sites in rural Damascus, as well as to people who remain in eastern Ghouta. Additionally, further financial assistance is urgently required to assist internally displaced people in Idlib and Aleppo governorates. Turning to the Central African Republic, the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and the African Union's Commissioner for Peace and Security, Smail Chergui, today met with the religious platform, which includes, among others, the Archbishop of Bangui, Dieudonné Nzapalainga, and the Imam of Bangui, Kobine Layama. The UN and AU officials praised the interfaith platform for its sustained efforts towards peace, in particular its recent mediations efforts in Bangassou and in the PK5 neighborhood of the capital. They reiterated the commitment of both the United Nations and the African Union to in support of sustainable peace in the Central African Republic through dialogue and through regional synergies and restoration of state authorities with all available means. Mr. Lacroix and Mr. Chergui also met a delegation from PK5 to discuss the ongoing situation and stressed the need to work with all those who are committed to peace through dialogue. In the afternoon, Mr. Lacroix chaired a memorial ceremony for a peacekeeper from Mauritania and one from Rwanda who were recently killed in attacks in Tagbara and in Bangui, respectively. There have been no major security incidents in Bangui today, although there have been some attempts to spread misinformation. The mission has reinforced its positions at key locations in the capital's 3rd district. And in relation to the guests we just had this morning, the Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, spoke at the General Assembly Hall at the event on improving global road safety. She said that deaths and injuries due to road traffic have become a serious and urgent global concern, with some 1.3 million people dying and up to 50 million getting injured on the world's roads every year. Ms. Mohammed said that the newly established United Nations Road Safety Trust Fund, which you just heard about, will help address this issue and help achieve the road safety-related sustainable development goals. She called on member states to contribute to the fund and pool their resources and expertise to save the lives of millions of people around the world and prevent suffering and loss. Senior personnel appointment. The Secretary General has appointed Marta Ruedas of Spain as his new Deputy Special Representative for the UN mission in Iraq. Ms. Ruedas will also serve as the UN's resident coordinator, humanitarian coordinator, and resident representative of the UN Development Program in Iraq. She succeeds, as you know, Lise Grande, who had served since 2014 in Iraq and who is now in Yemen. The Secretary General is grateful for Ms. Grande's leadership and dedicated service during her tenure. Ms. RUEDAS brings to this position more than 27 years of experience in coordinating UN and development work in conflict and post-conflict countries, as well as extensive experience in supporting peace-building transitions. She has served as the resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator for Sudan since 2015. And the latest records released today by the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan show that the number of civilians killed and injured by armed conflict has remained high levels this year. During the first 3 months of 2018, the mission documented 2,258 civilian casualties, that's 763 deaths and 1,495 injured, which is similar to the figures from the same time period in 2017 and 18. The mission called on all parties to do everything in their power to protect civilians from harm, stressing that Afghans continue to suffer caught in the conflict in ways that are preventable. The full report is on the website. And in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, our humanitarian colleagues launched today their Needs and Priorities Plan for this year, which seeks $111 million to assist 6 million of the most vulnerable people in the country. Undernutrition continues to be a serious concern in the DPRK, with more than 1/4 of children stunted due to lack of adequate food. People are also struggling to access basic services. Almost 1/4 of the population do not have access to sanitation facilities. The plan will focus on enhancing food security, reducing malnutrition, increasing access to health care, water and sanitation services, and building resilience to natural disasters. Wanted to flag a couple of events happening in our sister stations in Geneva and in Vienna. In Geneva, a meeting of the group of government experts are known as the GCE, are meeting on emerging technologies in the area of lethal autonomous weapon systems, otherwise known as LAWS. And that meeting has been taking place this week in Geneva, and the session will end tomorrow on April 13th. The second meeting is foreseen at the end of August, also in Geneva. Ambassador Amandeep Singh Gill of India is the chair of both meetings. The discussion will build on 3 informal meetings of experts on the topic held under the auspices of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. Participation in these meetings includes a wide array of stakeholders, including many from the Convention's 125 high contracting parties, as well as representatives of international organizations, non-governmental organizations, academia, private sector, and civil society. And a new from Vienna, I can tell you that a new episode of the popular Chinese reality show called Keep Running will be broadcast tomorrow. It will be broadcast in China. And as you may not know, the program was videotaped and shot at the UN in Vienna. 7 top Chinese celebrities visited the UN's headquarters in Austria last month to film an episode of the TV challenge show Keep Running, which is hugely popular with young people and others in China and across Asia. The 7 film, TV, and singing stars, who have combined social media following of more than 500 million people, took Chinese language guided tours with the Vienna Visitor Center and were briefed on the work of the UN. If you're interested, you can watch the show online tomorrow at 8:50 p.m. Chinese time, or 8:50 a.m. Tomorrow morning, Eastern Standard Time, on YouTube. And there is a focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, as there's always in every TV show filmed at the UN. Tomorrow, I will have the honor of being joined by Gordon Brown, the UN's Special Envoy for Global Education. He'll be here to provide you an update on the Education Cannot Wait initiative for children in emergencies. And at 1 p.m., Panos Moutsis, the UN Regional Humanitarian Coordinator for the Syria crisis, will be here to brief you. And in between those 2 briefings, there will be the meat in that sandwich will be both Brendan, it will be myself, and then followed by Brendan. We'll try to get in there in between those 2. Our new honor roll total is now 77. 2 more payments were received from nos amis in Bangui and in Tunis. And we thank them. And we take questions. Yes, sir.
Deepak Arora from the Tribune Online. So you mentioned about Secretary General speaking to the P5 members late last night. Could you just tell us what was the response of the P5 members and how did they react, and how did they ensure to the Secretary General that situation will not spiral out of condition?
I can't. I can only speak for one half of the conversation, for my boss's half of the conversation. For him, it was important to reach out to those ambassadors. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding. We're hoping that diplomatic discussions continue. We very much also hope that a mechanism will be found at some point to ensure accountability for the reported use of chemical weapons. We think that the issue of accountability is not only important, obviously, for the victims, first and foremost, but also as a way to ensure and strengthen the international normative system against the use of chemical weapons, and I think the wider disarmament, global disarmament efforts as well. Mr. Lee, and then we'll get back.
Actually, I have other stuff, but just on the same topic. Earlier today, I asked UK Ambassador Karen Pierce about this idea that the UK Prime Minister Theresa May was convening a, quote, war cabinet to make decisions about military action. And she said she couldn't answer that from here. I refer you to number 10. So it made me wonder, as you were giving this description of a call to the Perm reps, whether the Secretary General is actually thinking of trying to reach the principles. I take that answer to mean like the decision is made at a different level. Will he try to make such calls? And also, if he does, will you tell us?
No, I mean, if there are contacts that we wish to share with you, we will share them with you.
And I want to ask you about the CAR thing yesterday. I wish I'd been able to ask you when you read it out. I mean, it seems that some 17 corpses were laid in front of the UN's base there, and that many people are saying that they were, at least some of these people were civilians who were killed, maybe unintentionally, but they weren't all criminals. I heard on the radio that Mr. Montero, one of the spokespeople there, said everyone that was killed was a criminal. And I'm just wondering, on what basis does the UN believe that all 17 or more killed or 100 injured?
I didn't hear the same quote that you did. I think, as we've said on Sunday, our colleagues together with the Central African Security Forces launched Operation Sekula, which focused in Bangui's PK5 neighborhood. The aim was to arrest and disarm members of two heavily armed criminal groups, which have been preying on the local population. Those two, I think, were known as Force and 50-50. The operation, as I said, was planned jointly and was a joint operation. We also, prior to the operation, as we do, especially when we operate in heavily civilian neighborhoods, civilian neighborhoods, precautionary measures were taken to protect civilians before, during, and also after the operation. In the days following the operation, a number of violent incidents were recorded in Bangui. MINUSCA reacted to these and returned fire when targeted. The mission will continue to monitor the situation closely and will undertake a thorough internal investigation of the violent incidents in Bangui over the last few days.
I guess my question would be, like a normal police force, if somebody is inadvertently injured or killed, they pay compensation. They investigate it and they make themselves.
Well, as I said,
accountable.
there's an internal investigation going on. And I think there is calm in Bangui. I think the operation may have been suspended, but things are still ongoing.
Right,
but there will be an investigation.
Will there be compensation?
There will be an investigation.
Right.
And there is a SOFA, and their procedures will be followed. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The Security Council has set a date for its trip to Myanmar, Bangladesh, and Iraq. I'm wondering what the Secretary General hopes to see from that trip, and if you have a status update about the selection process for a special representative to the country.
No update on the process to find a special envoy for Myanmar from the Secretary General. What we hope is that the Council will show unity on the trip. It will help improve the situation in Myanmar in terms of help the government implement the conclusions of the Annan panel. And we also very much hope that it'll help refocus the attention of the international community on the plight of those Rohingya refugees who have fled to Bangladesh and the continuous need to fund the humanitarian operations. As you know, we're coming up to the monsoon season, which will create even newer and more challenges to them.
Thank you, Stéphane. The Syrian ambassador said that the OPCW would send 2 groups of investigators to Syria. They would arrive today. Have they arrived, and do you have more to share with us? And Sweden also proposing a draft resolution to the Security Council asking the SG to send a team of investigators to Syria. And do you have anything?
Well, obviously, you know, we'll wait to see what the Council comes up with. As the Secretary General said in his statement, as he's been saying repeatedly, he's very much focusing on hoping to find unity in the Security Council till they come together. They create an accountability mechanism. As I said, we have 50% of what we need here. We have the fact-finding team led by the OPCW. The UN on the ground in Syria will do its utmost to facilitate its work and help it logistically with security and whatever else they need. On whether or not they've actually arrived, I think you have to talk to the OPCW for the substance of their work, because I cannot speak for them. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. My first question is about the drums of war now are beating and loud. So would it be appropriate for the SG to at least issue a statement calling for restraint and calling on the parties to re-examine the issue, maybe going back to the Security Council?
Well, go ahead.
And my second question, a video has been released by 2 IDF spotting a Palestinian, and one of them asked the other for a bullet, and he shot him, and they were cheering. And now it is IDF is even investigating that. Have you any comment? Have you seen?
We would want to see a thorough investigation of this case. The reports, as we've seen in the press, are disturbing, and we look forward to the investigation. As for your first question, I don't think the Secretary General could have been clearer in the statement yesterday and I'll read just to be clear, when he reiterated his deep concern about the risks of the current impasse and stressed the need to avoid this situation spiraling out of control. He has called for restraint in the past, and he continues to do so in all his discussions with his interlocutors. I'll come back to you, Masood.
Yes. Stéphane, I wanted to know from you, how many UN team are there in Kahuta? Because I hear that who is sending a team of investigation over there to determine how many people are infected by the so-called nerve gas or whatever, and then there is an OPCW. So how many teams are there?
No, I don't. You have to check with WHO. My reading is that they are not sending a team, but again, you have to speak to them. The fact-finding team is an OPCW-led team. As we've seen the reports, the Syrian government has said they would support their work. We look forward to them being on the ground and being able to access what they need to access and to make a determination.
So it seems that there are going to be 2 teams. Whether
no, that's not at all what I said.
No, what I'm saying is, because who is sending its team also? And that's what they said in a statement today.
Okay. I can barely speak, and I can speak for what I know. So I think I've answered to the best of my ability. Okay. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, this is something that I'd asked you on Friday, and I was hoping to get a confirmation from you, whether a range of Tamil diaspora groups, now some in Sri Lanka, have written to Mr. Lacroix, showing him evidence that more than 40 Sri Lankan soldiers who were deployed to UNIFIL were not, in fact, vetted by the local Human Rights Commission. And since that was one, he himself has described that process and relying on it in a press conference in this room. One, I just wanted to make sure that he's gotten the letter. It seems that he has, and if you can say that. And 2, what is the response to the groups and the evidence they've presented?
Yes, my understanding is that the letter has been received, but I hope to have something for you, but I don't. So.
And I wanted to ask you another, I'd asked yesterday in writing, but there's an audit has emerged, Inner City Press has published it, of irregularities and cost overruns in UNSOS's provision of rations in Somalia, over $51.3 million of cost overruns using an outside company, when it seems that both the auditors and people that work there say the UN could have done it itself. And I'm wondering, it's a negative audit. What steps is taken by
I haven't
UNSOS?
seen the audit. I'll take a look at it. Brendan,
Can I ask one more?
So you're, go ahead.
All
Why
right,
not?
thanks a lot. It actually, well, I was going to do death penalty or Syria, but I'll do Syria. It's a little more timely. You heard Mr. Tott's answer on why the organization that he funded has provided funding to the Syrian automobile
He doesn't
club.
fund the organization.
No, okay.
He's
The
the president.
organization he's the president of has funded. Okay, no, absolutely. That wasn't really the point. My point was this, and I wanted to understand this because I think there are many people that are curious about this. By process of alphabet, it seems that Syria will become the president of the UN Conference on Disarmament on May 28th. And some member states have said this is an outrage. There's some discussion of the walkouts. I know the UN is what it is, but I also know that the Secretary General, for example, it's up to the Security Council what they do on Syria, but he saw fit to call them. For the appearances and sort of for the good name of the UN, is it in fact the case that he is entirely hands-off and finds this a fine turn of events, or would he attempt, as others have sometimes done, to make a switch with other positions? What is his position on Syria being the president of the Conference on Disarmament?
It's not for him. You're right. He's called out member states on substance, but the RODA is what it is. It is not for him to intervene in the procedural impact. It's, I think it was Switzerland. Now it's Syria. It is and solely a decision of the member states themselves on how they work. I think we all expect member states to live up to the values of this organization. I think those who are involved in certain committees and lead certain committees, I think have even a higher responsibility to ensure that.
Speaking of calling states out, in his trip to China, we just had a press conference on the death penalty, and the finding of Amnesty International is that far and away the most executions were carried out in China. Was this issue raised in any of the meetings?
The issue of human rights was raised with the Secretary General in a number of his meetings with the senior-most Chinese leadership, and it was also mentioned in his speech. Thank you.